The presentation of Toledo Stories is made possible in part by Key Bank, celebrating the strength of our region's history and supporting the promise of its future. Key Bank, achieve anything.
Presentation of Toledo on the Air is made possible by a grant from Paramount Elite, the Paramount plan for Medicare beneficiaries on behalf of the thousands of Toledo area residents who have made Paramount Elite their Medicare choice.
Remember when Art Berry interviewed your neighbors on the street for WSPD? How about waiting in your pajamas every morning, hoping that Miss Connie would see you through her magic mirror? Or watching Frank Venner do the weather in the weather. Those were the days. No satellites, no cable boxes, just a couple of channels and a few personalities who were more like family than stars. We're going to take you back to Toledo's golden age of broadcasting with some of the people who made it happen. It's going to be a great show, so sit back and relax. We'll get started after this word from our sponsor.
Here's a fellow who's thinking about food, and he knows where to find good food. He goes to Miller's Cafeteria, where the special changes daily. Tomorrow's special complete meal features meatloaf, choice of potatoes and vegetable, roll, choice of cake, and hot beverage at just 69 cents. Stop in tomorrow and enjoy the daily special at Miller's, open 11 till 9.
And of course, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome once again to WSPD's Saturday Night Dancing Party, a program of supper dance melodies featuring the piano artistry of Gardner Benedict, his songs and his orchestra, playing to you from the beautifully appointed Shalimar Room at the Commodore Perry Hotel in downtown Toledo.
The first broadcast in Toledo came without pictures. That didn't bother folks much. Looking back, most of us who can remember kind of liked it that way.
Jack Armstrong! Jack Armstrong! Jack Armstrong, the all-American boy.
When I was a kid, you listened to radio all the time, you know. Right home from school, into the house, get a glass of something, if there was anything there, and turn the radio on, because on were coming Superman and Jack Armstrong and the all-American boy.
But maybe he's already been on board, Uncle Jim. Maybe he's found the chart in the ring.
He may have been aboard, Billy, but I don't believe he could have found the chart in the ring. Not unless he's developed a magic eye of some kind.
I'll bet he thinks he has all night to hunt for the chart and ring, Uncle Jim.
I tell you, I can remember being more entertained by radio than I have by television ever, I think.
Great. Absolutely great entertainment. And it left something to the imagination. You thought about it in your mind, and with television it's all there, and sometimes there's too much of it there. But with radio, it was such a wonderful way to just lose yourself and see what was happening and see it all in your mind.
There's an exciting time ahead, so be sure to listen in at this same time tomorrow for another thrilling episode of The Chart and Ring with Jack Armstrong, the all-American boy.
Sitting there in the glow of the radio tubes, we could see the whole world. And the station that brought it to us was 1370 AM, WSPD.
This is the voice of Toledo, WSPD. The shows are the finest when you set your dial at 1370.
When the station at 1370 signed on from the Navarre Hotel in April 1921, it was called WTAL. Then George Storer and J. Harold Ryan bought it, moved it to the Commodore Perry Hotel, and renamed it WSPD, Speedy for short, to help sell the Speedine gas they sold at their filling stations. Speedy was the first station in Ohio. And for a lot of us, for a long time, it was radio in Toledo.
There wasn't anything else. Every radio set in the area here was welded to WSPD 1370, and there wasn't anything else. WSPD was the station.
Here comes the funny money man, the funny money man, the funny money man. Oh, here comes the funny money man, ting-a-ling-a-ling your way.
Listen for the news tone, bringing you the latest news first from the voice of Toledo, WSPD, with studios in the broadcast building.
Oh, it's the Smith Tennesseans.
Hello.
Roy, Dick, Slick,
And Shorty.
I'm feeling high and rolling along, feeling sky high and singing the song.
Dr. Kanega, 623 Adams Street near Erie, is offering genuine Cryptok invisible bifocal glasses for reading and distant vision for only $3.50. Examination free whether you buy glasses or not.
Welcome to the Fred Waring Show. Fred Waring and his Pennsylvanians. Today we're broadcasting from the Paramount Theater in Toledo, Ohio, through the facilities of WSPD. And here to greet you is your host, Fred Waring.
WSPD was there in good times and bad. When World War II came, the voices of Speedy kept us informed and reassured.
The Japanese must write off the Philippines campaign as a costly failure. General Douglas MacArthur has announced in Manila that the Philippines campaign...
This program is respectfully dedicated to all the boys and girls serving with Uncle Sam's armed forces and to all the folks here at home, all banded together to bring an earlier victory and peace.
Before he became a priest, Jim Troutwine was one of those voices that helped us through the war years.
What they wanted was anyone who had a usable voice and a decent pulse rate and was 4F. They were losing people to the Army, of course, all the time during the war. And so I came in under those conditions. During the war, people listened to news continually. Radio was a very strong part of everybody's life then, I think.
But perhaps the most familiar and authoritative voice on WSPD was Jim Ubelhart's. He was the man with the news.
Now to the news and Jim Ubelhart. Good afternoon, everybody. At this morning's meeting of City Council, sitting as a committee of the whole, Mayor Lloyd Roulet made a motion to refuse...
Jim Ubelhart did the news during World War II. That's the first thing you wanted when you got up in the morning was the war news, and I can still hear him saying, "This is Jim Ubelhart filing gas company newscast number 1,327," or whatever it was. He used to count them off, but Jim Ubelhart was the newscaster in Toledo. Nobody even close to him.
Yes, we all thought the world of Jim, even if we had a little trouble with that last name.
They called him all kinds of names. Jim Ugelboogle. I can't even think of all of them, but his name was rather hard to pronounce for some people. People never thought they'd really heard the news until they heard it from Jim Ubelhart.
Hold-up men in Midwestern cities are being baffled by a new microphone doorbell installation. A radio manufacturer started selling the device after learning...
Jim Ubelhart gave us the news, but Art Berry, he gave us a chance to be on the radio. Art was WSPD's roving ambassador. He would take his microphone out of the studio at the drop of a hat, and boy, could he draw a crowd.
Well, there's always a big crowd around. Art was the main attraction in town. He was known as, Grandpa Barry, really. That was because he had back trouble, and he did some limping occasionally. So he called him, "This is old Grandpa Barry." And it just stuck, and he did that for years and years.
Hello, this is old Grandpa Barry again, down in the lobby of the Paramount Theater with another sidewalk interview for Kay's Jewelry at 344 Summit Street.
We went to one small town every week, and they would hold Art Berry Day, and they would let the kids out of school, and they would have a big assembly of people downtown, and they'd block the traffic, of course, and we'd set up our PA system in the middle of the street, and interview our people and make our recording right in our truck right there and bring it back and play it that night. But they were great. They were wonderful days, all these wonderful people, just great. All over northwestern Ohio.
It's the channel with the quality shows, the one where you can hear and see the best TV around. In Toledo, keep your TV screen on Channel 13, WSPD TV.
WSPD called itself Toledo's pioneer radio station. So it wasn't much of a surprise that when television came to the city, it came from WSPD in the broadcast building at 136 Huron Street.
In 1947, I got my first television set. It was a 7-inch Hallicrafter in a metal cabinet.
Harry Prue had been an engineer at WSPD for 5 years. He knew all about the new technology that promised moving pictures in every home. Still, when it happened, he was awestruck.
We were still setting things up, and I worked late that night and got home, and I just happened to switch Channel 13 on this thing, and a picture came up. Channel 13, the first time I'd seen it on the air outside of the building, and I was amazed. I couldn't believe how beautiful and sharp it was. It was really something to see, and I knew then that things would never be the same.
It turns out Harry was a little ahead of his time. It took the rest of us a bit longer to warm up to television.
When Channel 13 went on the air, there were 2 stations in Detroit. And to give you an idea of how Toledoans felt about Channel 13, the first few rating books that came out, we were number 3 in a 1-station market. So it didn't speak too well for us.
TV kind of snuck up on us. A lot of folks said it would never amount to much, and it certainly couldn't replace radio. Still, it was like magic to see that picture appear on the screen, almost hypnotic.
Where people used to listen to their radio, they were now watching TV. And they would watch practically anything. I mean, they'd sit and watch any kind of dumb thing, just in the hopes that what came next would be better, you know?
We had a remote truck and we had a remote crew, and the remote crew's job was strictly to go out almost daily to do a remote, and we did every imaginable remote that you can imagine. We opened toy stores. We opened automobile dealerships. I mean, this was supposed to be entertainment.
We did the first live programs on television by taking a camera out the back door, up the alley, and I would interview people getting off the bus. That was the first.
Those early shows didn't amount to much, but they did draw us together. You see, TV sets were pretty darn expensive at that time.
We had a 10-inch Motorola that was in about a 48-inch cabinet, and then we'd sit and put up folding chairs, have people come into our living room, and we'd have 8-10 people overnight watching roller derby and you know, that type of programming. Wrestling and roller derby were the 2 big hitters.
If you couldn't afford a TV at first, there were plenty of stores in Toledo that would rent you one. They knew that once you had a set in your living room, you'd find it pretty hard to give it up again.
My grandmother, who was in her mid-70s at the time, had become a great fan of wrestling. And she just needed to have her wrestling every Saturday night or her week wasn't complete. And although she hated to admit that, and if you'd ask her, well, you know, you're a big fan of wrestling, it's really important. She, oh, no, I can do without it. But she was always in there and always watching. And the story goes that when Mother had decided to return the television, it was Grandmother who said the television was going to stay.
It didn't take long once Grandma was won over. WSPD let us see the country's brightest stars right in our own living rooms. And pretty soon we were hooked. Just ask WSPD's switchboard operator.
We went off the air with Romper one night, right in the middle of things, and we're off. They didn't get to see the show, and we were the only ones showing it. They couldn't turn to a Detroit station, so the calls came into the station, and I pegged some 1,100 calls for that.
I'm not sure when we realized how much it would dominate things. I think we all felt that the networks would continue to be as powerful in radio as they had been. I think that after a year or so, we began to realize that radio as we had known it was simply not going to survive, that television would take over.
Radio officers are still voting, are expected to ratify the agreement and immediately free 100 freighters.
When television took off in Toledo, many of the city's best-known radio personalities hopped on for the ride, and suddenly we had faces to go along with all those familiar voices. Jim Rhodes, John Saunders, Frank Venner, Frank Gilhooly, they all made the switch to TV and became icons.
When I first started there, they were not broadcasting that many hours a day. And radio was king and television was the little upstart down the street. At the time, I think the opportunity came up and they said, we would like you to move to television. And I said, well, I think that's where my future is.
They got in on the ground floor and made it up as they went along in the early days at WSPD. TV wasn't always comfortable for these radio men, but somehow they made it look easy.
Newsmen were announcers becoming, in the process of becoming newsmen. So you might see him doing the news at 6 o'clock and at 10:30 that night selling a vacuum cleaner or something like that.
I enjoyed doing play-by-play, but I never really liked sitting and anchoring the 6 and 11 o'clock news all those years. That kind of bothered me. I just never was comfortable with it. Never really was comfortable. I used to kid that I wore training pants when I was on the air.
WSPD's TV pioneers had Toledo's airwaves pretty much to themselves until 1958. That's when WTOL signed on from atop the Hillcrest Hotel, and things started to get serious.
Channel 13 for 10 years had no competition, so obviously we won the ratings. But in 1958, when our second channel hit the town, WTOL, then of course it was dog eat dog, and then the ratings became extremely important.
We would monitor, for example, the two-way radios of the other stations, and if they were sending a cruise somewhere that we didn't know anything about, we would jump in the car and go find out what was going on. And there was always rivalry. Sometimes they would we and they would plant a fake call to decoy them away from wherever we were actually going to be.
As the stations fought for our attention, we got to know some new celebrities. Gordon Ward, Don Edwards, and Doug and Oris Tabner brought us local news and sports. Soon John Saunders left WSPD to join them at the anchor desk. And every night behind the scenes, Art Edgerton pulled double duty, reading the news on WTOL radio and making sure the station's TV cameras were on the scene whenever a story broke, even though he'd never see the pictures they made.
I would read to Art some of the stories that we had carried on the 11 o'clock. He would take them down in Braille, and then he would rebroadcast those on radio news throughout the night. And Art was our ears during the night there. If something happened, he'd monitor the radios, get on the phone, see that somebody was notified, so that we had 24-hour coverage.
The job that I had, of course, was a new exploration in this town for broadcasting. And people thought that I couldn't do it because of the lack of one facility. But it worked out, fortunately for me, it worked out that I was able to perform.
When you walked in the room and he heard your voice, he knew you
and right away could begin to conduct a conversation with you about things that you may have discussed in the past. He had that kind of a great memory, which said to me early on, Art Edgerton was a man of journalism because he had a great sensitivity toward people.
Throughout the 60s, every night, WSPD and WTOL brought us all the Toledo news and sports, and for the most part, it all looked about the same. But when it came to the weather, there was no competition. They didn't have computers back then, only maps and some magic markers. But the way they used those simple tools made all the difference in the world. WTOL did weather in the studio, but WSPD did weather in the weather.
Weather in the Weather was on for 10 years, from 1959 to 1969, and was probably the program that I became most identified with during my career. But the interesting aspect is that I wasn't the one who started that program. It was Jim Roods.
We actually took, and these were not portable cameras, these were regular studio cameras. And we just took it out and rolled it down the alley between the two buildings. You know, the Commodore is on the other side of the alley from us, and take it out the back door and roll it up the alley and take it out in front. And we had cables running all the way back to the studio. I don't know how far that would be, but it's certainly almost a city block.
They would hand me a microphone. I would walk behind the board, which had the map of the United States on it. And then one of the fascinations is that I would write backward because I had to, so that people could, you know, people at home could see what I was doing. So I learned to write backwards.
I never really did master it, to tell you the truth. Frank, he got to the point where he could write backward better than he could write forward. But I was always a little hesitant about it.
And if the backward writing wasn't entertainment enough, the public sometimes got in on the act.
I can remember one night it was about 15 below zero at 11 o'clock at night. And a car pulled up with a bunch of college kids, and they had no shirts on. And they had to be absolutely hospital cases because it was so cold. And to add to the glamour, if you want to call it that, they were all eating ice cream cones.
Looking back, Toledo's first newscasts weren't the most sophisticated things on TV, but then again, we weren't the most sophisticated audience. We've changed since then, and the news has too, but it's nice to remember simpler times when TV was young in Toledo, and so were the people who built it.
I'm very much aware that these guys built the foundation. They were there when television first went on the air. We're just carriers of the torch. They built the foundation. They put Channel 13 and Channel 11 on the map in this town. And we're just here, in my opinion, to try to uphold the standards.
Shop anytime, any day the new Lion Store way. Just tell it to, the mechanical man in the Lion Store, St. Clair Street window. Now, you can make your Lion Store purchases on the spot while you're window shopping. It's the easy way to shop. You give your name, your address, your telephone number, size, and color preference. Anytime, day or night, holidays, Sundays, every day, while you're window shopping or just passing by the Lion Store, tell it to, the mechanical man is ready to take your order. The 25 cents you deposit when you talk to Tell It To is credited against your purchase. Tell It To takes your order on the spot. The order is then filled and delivered promptly. There's no red tape. It's quick and easy. Just Tell It To, the mechanical man in the Lion Store's St. Clair Street window.
Pictures of your products, right in the homes of your customers. It was a dream come true for Toledo merchants, and they bombarded us with ads for everything from nylons to mobile homes. In the early days, it wasn't unusual for the man reading the news to stop and sell you soap or even a beer, and it was usually done live.
I did commercials for Lane Drugs. They were selling an inexpensive, I won't use the word cheap, an inexpensive waterproof wristwatch. And the idea was, in the opening commercial of the program, I would sing the praises of this wristwatch. And then right at the end of that commercial, I would put it down in a fishbowl full of water. And when they came out to the closing commercial, I would take the watch out of the fishbowl. And it would still be running. One night, doing this, and we were about to come out the last commercial, and I looked down, and I couldn't quite see whether it was running or not. And George Fulop was the cameraman, and he was in real close, racking his lens in to get a tight close-up of it. And I said, George, don't get too close. I think the damn thing stopped. And just then I realized there was total silence in the studio, which meant that the film was over and the microphone was on. And I just sort of, well, what do you know, it hasn't. What else are you going to say?
Yes, the sponsor's product was always tip-top, and these men had to make us believe that, even when they could barely stomach what they were selling.
For a long time, I did a show for a cracker company, and I was not awfully fond of those crackers, but I certainly had to let the people know that they were absolutely wonderful, and I thought they were delicious.
I mean, you were supposed to say, I do this, I do that, I use this, I use that. When in effect it was a bald-faced lie. You didn't use it. I mean, you'd be selling some food product, and you'd say, in our kitchen it's always so-and-so, and your wife wouldn't touch whatever that was with a 10-foot stick.
Believe it or not, even selling cool, refreshing beer on live TV could be awfully hard work.
The beer was very warm, and the sponsor wanted it that way because it made it show a good head on the beer when it was poured. Well, you had to take this lukewarm glass of suds and in some way make it look refreshing and agreeable to the audience. We kept restoratives on hand in an icebox for when we got off the air.
Buy the case or buy the bottle at your favorite tavern, you're in for a new taste treat. Real, natural flavor. When you ask for Kerber's Pilsner beer. Kerber's Pilsner, brewed by master brewers, is your beer. The beer of good taste.
It didn't take long for advertisers to fill Toledo's airwaves. It got to the point where you really had to stick out to be noticed. And that's just what the Brandeis brothers managed to do.
I'd read a book when I got out of college on how 5 men became millionaires, and they all did it by being different. They went into a standard business, a standard industry, and did things in a different way, something very, very different that people would remember. So I thought, if we go on television and we do something really crazy and really hokey and kind of burlesque and fun, that maybe people would remember us.
You don't always run across dealers like the Brandeis boys, right, Brother Don?
Right, Brother Phil. We're using our heads to save you money.
And I remember we had 2 telephone lines at the dealership. They were seldom ever used because we didn't do a lot of business. In a matter of 1 week, we had 30 lines that we had to introduce into the dealership because we had so many people calling and complaining about our advertising. And then other people were calling because they wanted to buy cars, and before that, nobody was calling hardly at all. So we realized it was successful.
I'm Phil Brandeis. I'll sell this new Fairlane hardtop for only $22.95.
Hold it, little bro.
Oh, yeah. My own brother can't beat $22.95.
Phil Brandeis' ads were pretty good at getting the brothers noticed. But one day, Don had an idea that turned out to be the Brandeis' biggest break.
my brother Don Brandes is the one that thought of the idea of busting the windshields and finally convinced me that we should try it. And so we tried it. It was very successful, and it's lived with us all these years. And probably everywhere I go, they think there's that crazy guy that used to bust windshields. And I still to this day have people come up and say, how could you waste that money when there's so many poor people in the world? How could you take that money and waste it busting that perfectly good windshield? Well, they were all under warranty. Ford would produce them, and in those days they had problems with glass. And there'd be a little distortion, and Ford would warranty them, and we'd put a new windshield in them, so we'd bust that one that was out of warranty, and that got people's attention. And it did produce an image that I've never been able to live down.
By the end of the 60s, Toledo had 4 TV stations. 3 of them sold commercials to stay in business. But one station, WGTE, was a completely different animal. It was a public television station, part of an experiment to reserve a segment of the airwaves for culture and education. It started out at the University of Toledo, moved to the Board of Education at Manhattan and Elm, and eventually took its place in the historic broadcast building on Huron Street, the place where WSPD-TV had been born. WGTE brought new children's programs to Toledo and joined the other stations in entertaining and educating our kids. In the early days, every station had something for its youngest viewers. At WSPD, it was Fun Farm.
I remember going on Fun Farm when I was a 3rd grade Girl Scout. The word came from the Girl Scout leader that our troop was going to be on Fun Farm. It was instant excitement throughout the group. And the big day came, and I was sick that day. I wasn't in school. And I was nearly devastated and actually begged my parents to take me down to the station so that I could be on Fun Farm.
Okay, then. Did you eat a great big breakfast this morning?
And when I walked in the door, it was a bunch of kids all excited, all dressed as nicely as they could, and we went into the studio, and I remember clapping spoons at the beginning, and there was some kind of song that we all clapped spoons with, and there was like a barnyard set.
Wonderful today. Well, we've got a lot of birthdays.
But it was a real fun experience, just something that I was really excited to do. And I remember the next day when I went to school, the teacher that I had, Sister, I can't remember her name, said to me, well, I see that you were well enough to be on Fun Farm. And though that was really kind of a hard thing for me to take, I always thought it was well worth it because it was such a neat experience.
Over at WTOL, Mr. T entertained the kiddies with cartoons. Actually, there were 2 Mr. T's. Brooks Morton was the first. He was a ventriloquist with an alter ego named Ethelbert. And then there was Jack Kessling. He'd come on every night at 5 and wing it until the news came on.
We didn't have a script, more or less. I would just tell my audio man, and they would shoot sound effects to me when they found out I was getting stuck downstairs and I didn't know what to say or what to do, or I was kind of slowing the show down a little bit, or the pace would slow down. So they would shoot a telephone ring to me or something and give me the opportunity then to pick up the phone and just talk to somebody. And I would say things like, oh, hello, yes, oh, that's too bad. Broken back, huh? Gee, that's too bad. I'd hang up, and Dan Danner would say, broken back? Who broke their back? And I says, oh, nothing. We gave $35 to Tony Rigoli, and he went over to Fort Wayne, and he lost all his money. Now he's broken back.
Well, I will have to fix it. See how the motor goes on and goes off. You never know when the motor's going to go. Where are we going now with it? I forgot we don't have brakes on this thing, so I got to put my hands against the wall, and that'll stop it. Hold on. Oh, that's smart.
When Mr. T went off the air in 1971, Patches and Pockets took his place. They were a couple of rag dolls with some peculiar habits.
Grandma Goody's helping us. Oh, I'm so excited about tonight, Pockets. What time is it anyways? Oh, that's right. Well, here, hold this. I gotta move over and get Teddy some room. Come on, Teddy. If I got a surprise for you. Let's see. It is, dun-da-dun, dun-da-dun-dun-dun. Patches? What? It's 4 inches. Oh, well, we got lots of time. What do you want to know that for? Well, because...
Pockets toe time with a ruler. Mm-hmm. And the kids loved it when we go to a personal appearance. They would say, you don't tell time with a ruler in inches. They just like they wanted me to understand that. And I'd say, you don't? Oh, and I never did quite understand it. And it would just frustrate them a little bit.
Or they'd on parades and that they'd say, hey,
What time-
Pockets, what time is it? And then she'd rip out that ruler and they'd laugh.
Yeah, yeah. And then Pockets also thought with his shoe. When he couldn't think of anything, he would just put his shoe on his head and think and think and think. And they'd say, I got it.
Do you know when the War of 1812 was fought?
The War of 1812.
Yep, I'm going to think about it.
The war, what kind of a war was it?
And then when we would do shows for kids and that, they would sit there, they would put their shoes on their heads. That's how they would greet us when we came in. They'd all have the shoes on their heads.
By the time Patches and Pockets hung up their shoes, some of their original fans were all grown up. But those two dolls never seemed to change.
As the years rolled on, you know, with us being on television going on 10, 12 years, and we started aging as Bev and Sue, we were really tickled.
Are you aging?
Well, just a little bit.
Wow.
But we were glad that we had gone with a painted face character, you know, that really didn't show the age like we would have. So we didn't realize we were on 18 years when we started.
If you grew up watching cartoons on WSPD, you might also remember Bill Spencer, although you probably knew him as Uncle Ben. He was there every week for 25 years.
You know, there's a lot of things you can do on rainy days. Did you know that? And I got a whole book of things here, even things to do on rainy days. So and look at all the things. Boy, that book is just loaded with all kinds of things to do. And I turn to this page right here, and it tells us how to make a paper tree. Would you like to try that with me?
Yeah.
And then there was Romper Room. Long before Mr. Rogers and Big Bird, we had Miss Nancy and Doobie. And every morning for more than 25 years, America's kids went to kindergarten on TV.
Happy Jack says, it's time for Romper Room School.
It was a children's kindergarten program, and it was started by the Clasters, Nancy and Bert Claster, in Baltimore, Maryland. I came on board when it was 25 years old, I believe, and their daughter had been the original. Miss Nancy was her name, and gosh, it was all over the United States. Each market had their own Romper Room person, and the children just really had a good time. The parents would have to put them on a waiting list the minute they were born in order to get them on the program.
Look and see if you're right.
Toledo had 5 Romper Room teachers who taught for a total of 20 years. Judy Turner was the first, and Connie Harlan came next.
The very first day I was to be on the air, my car wouldn't start. It was January. And I remember I was living on Collingwood, and I remember racing down Collingwood hoping to catch a bus. The studio at the time was in the top floor of the Hillcrest Hotel at the penthouse. So I didn't have far to go, but I still thought I ought to catch a bus. And racing down the street, and a gentleman stopped, and he said, "Do you need a ride?" And of course, all of the all of your training says never get in the car with a stranger. But I was desperate, and he looked like a nice guy, and so I jumped in the car, and he took me to the Hillcrest Hotel, and I jumped out and was there on time. Almost missed the first show.
But the show went on that day just like it did every day, and thousands of kids held their breath waiting for Miss Connie or Miss Judy or Miss Sue to see them through her magic mirror. When she did, what a thrill.
A little boy was watching the show, and I suppose he had just gotten up, and he just had his underwear on, and I happened to say the name Jamie as I was looking through the magic mirror, and that was his name, and he ran because he said, "Mom, she's seeing me in my underwear."
That magic mirror made a lifetime of memories for thousands of little doobies in Toledo.
If I go someplace and somebody happens to know that I was on Romper Room, or it gets mentioned, they still say, "Well, you never said my name." That seems to be a biggie. They didn't get their name said.
I'm going to get my magic mirrors. because Romper Room is over for today. I'm going to see if I can find you. Romper, bumper, stumper, boo. Tell me, do. Magic mirror, tell me today. Did all my friends have fun at play?
And I see Carrie and Ann and Jamie and Doug, and I see Corey, and I see Kevin and Helena, and there's Joanna and Ron, and I'll be seeing you tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock on Channel 24 in the Romper Room School.
On June 23, 1962, a day that no doubt lives on in the memories of many a former doobie, Miss Connie Harlan married WTOL's Gordon Ward. It was a made-for-television event if ever there was one.
The promotion director thought this was just great and wanted to televise the wedding. And we both flip-flop back and forth. First one would be in favor and the other against, and then we would reverse our thinking. And ultimately, he settled in on it at a moment when we both said we would be in favor of it, and so they televised the wedding.
This wedding was the biggest thing to hit Toledo in a long, long time, and almost everyone involved had a little bit of stage fright.
The TV cameras did not bother us in the least. We didn't even know they were there, but everybody else was nervous. We were nervous because had never been married before. The ministers were nervous. They had done lots of weddings, but never on television. Everybody was nervous, including the church sexton.
The sexton, who was supposed to coordinate the two parties and get them at the altar on time, had been very nervous about this whole affair and had stopped by his apartment every time he walked through and had a little nip. And finally, the last time he went by his apartment, he just passed out.
No one knew this, and the wedding was delayed because we're waiting for this man to give us the cue to go. Each of us thought the other one had stood her up. I thought Connie had stood me up. She thought I'd walked out on her, left her at the altar, as it were.
Once it got started, the wedding went off without a hitch. But when Mr. and Mrs. Ward prepared to enter the reception hall, they found that no party could ever compete with what was on TV that night.
We went over to the reception hall and we noticed that there were very few people left and wondered what had happened, and everybody said that they had gone to restaurants and bars wherever there were TV sets so they could see the wedding on television. The only people left to even help us get to the car were the best man and his wife. So there was no rice, there was no anything.
It's almost like you're part of their life because they see you. I'd walk into a restaurant and people say, "Hi, Phil." Hi, Phil. I never saw him before in my life, and I get embarrassed. To this day, I get embarrassed because they remember my name, and I can't remember theirs. And I think, gee, maybe I went to school with that guy, or I should know him from this or that, or he's a customer. Never saw him before, but he acts like he's your friend because you're on TV. You become part of that person's life, and you never saw him before. That's the power of TV.
These aren't stars. They're friends we've invited into our living rooms for more than a half-century now. They grew up on the air, and we grew up with them. They made us laugh, gave us the news, taught our children, even sold us a little snake oil now and then. And in return, we gave them loyalty and affection. All in all, a pretty good bargain.
I never thought once of doing anything else because I thought that what I was doing, I did pretty well, and I enjoyed every minute of it.
I made a lot of friends, even today, even these days, even now. people say, well, there's Art Berry. And my God, look, here I am, all of these ages old.
Maybe this is a place to give us pause to think that things above price are often things remembered. These we can never buy, nor sell, nor lose. Dearest of all to our hearts are our memories, richer than lands and caravans and ships.
Presentation of Toledo on the Air was made possible by a grant from Paramount Elite, the Paramount Plan for Medicare beneficiaries, on behalf of the thousands of Toledo area residents who have made Paramount Elite their Medicare choice.
The presentation of Toledo Stories is made possible in part by Key Bank, celebrating the strength of our region's history and supporting the promise of its future. Key Bank, achieve anything.